My mother walked out on my brother and me when I was just 6 years old, leaving behind a cold house, half-empty cabinets, and a note that completely shattered our world, only for her to show up on my doorstep 16 years later, acting like nothing ever happened. I literally stared at her through the glass of my front door in suburban Chicago for a solid 10 seconds, my heart pounding against my ribs, unable to process the middle-aged stranger standing there with a nervous smile and a faded leather suitcase. To understand why my stomach twisted into knots and why every drop of blood in my body ran cold, you have to go back to a freezing Tuesday in November back in 2010. I was 6 and my brother Leo was 9. Our dad had passed away just a year prior from a sudden heart attack, leaving our mom, Brenda, to raise us alone in a modest 3-bedroom ranch-style house in Ohio. We thought we were just having a normal week. Mom had tucked us into bed, kissed our foreheads, and told us she loved us. But when we woke up the next morning, the house was dead silent. No smell of coffee, no sound of the morning news on the tiny kitchen television, and no mom. Leo, being the older one, checked her room. Her bed was made, her closet was half empty, and on the kitchen counter sat a $20 bill and a crumpled piece of loose leaf paper. I still remember Leo reading it out loud, his 9-year-old voice cracking with confusion. She wrote that she couldn't handle the pressure, that we deserved a better life than what she could provide, and that she was leaving to start over somewhere out west. She told us our Aunt Sarah, who lived 3 states away and whom we had met maybe twice, was on her way to pick us up. And just like that, she erased herself from our existence. Aunt Sarah took us in, and God bless her, she did the best she could. She raised us with a fierce kind of love, working 2 jobs to put food on our table, making sure Leo got through high school and into trade school, and helping me apply for colleges. We built a new life. We moved past the gaping hole where our mother used to be. It took years of therapy, countless nights of me crying myself to sleep wondering what was wrong with me, and a whole lot of hard work. But Leo and I finally found peace. Leo became an independent HVAC technician, moved into his own place just 20 minutes away from me here in the suburbs, and I landed a solid marketing job after graduating from university. We were safe, we were stable, and we had each other. We didn't talk about Brenda anymore. To us, she was just a ghost from a nightmare we had finally woken up from. Until last Thursday evening, I was sitting on my living room couch, winding down after a long day at the office with a plate of leftover pasta, when someone knocked on my door. It wasn't a delivery driver knock. It was that hesitant 3-tap knock that immediately makes you feel uneasy. I walked over, peered through the peephole, and saw a woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair, wearing a trench coat that looked a bit too heavy for the spring weather. When I opened the door, she looked at me with tears welling up in her eyes and whispered my childhood nickname. My knees literally went weak. It was her, Brenda. 16 years of buried trauma, anger, and abandonment rushed back all at once, hitting me like a freight train. She didn't even wait for an invitation. She just took a half step forward, her lower lip trembling, and said, "Please, Chloe, let me come inside. I need to explain everything." I stood frozen in the doorway, blocking her path, my hands gripping the wooden frame so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing a million miles an hour. Part of me wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, throw her suitcase out into the driveway, and slam the door in her face. Another part of me, the little 6-year-old girl who had stared at that $20 bill on the counter for hours, wanted to demand why. Why did you leave us? Why didn't you ever call? Why now? My voice came out flat, cold, and barely above a whisper when I finally spoke. You have about 10 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't call the police for trespassing before I lose my absolute mind. She flinched, looking genuinely wounded, which honestly made me even angrier. She raised her hands in a placating gesture and said she knew she had no right, that she was a coward, and that she had spent every single day of the last 16 years regretting what she did. She begged me to just hear her out for 5 minutes over a cup of coffee. I don't know what possessed me, maybe morbid curiosity, maybe a twisted desire to finally get closure. But I stepped aside and let her in. I didn't offer her a seat on the couch. I just pointed to the kitchen island and told her to make it quick because my brother was on his way over. When she heard Leo's name, she actually gasped, clutching her chest. She sat down on a bar stool, looking around my apartment as if she were inspecting a museum exhibit, taking in the framed prints on the walls and the plants on the windowsill. I poured myself a fresh glass of water, stood on the opposite side of the counter, and crossed my arms. "All right," I said, staring her dead in the eyes. "I'm listening. Start talking." And what she told me over the next 20 minutes completely flipped my world upside down again. But not in the way you would expect. She didn't come back to reconnect out of the goodness of her heart. She didn't come back because she missed us. She started crying, real heavy, sloppy tears, and told me that she had remarried a few years after leaving us, moved to California, and had another family, 2 more kids. She said her husband was a successful businessman, but things had gone south recently. Apparently, her husband got mixed up in some terrible financial schemes, accumulated massive debts, and then suddenly passed away from a sudden medical emergency, leaving her with foreclosure notices, 0 savings, and 2 teenagers to support. She looked up at me, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate, and said she had nowhere else to turn. She told me that since Leo and I were established now, with stable jobs and no kids, she was hoping we could all be one big happy family again, and maybe, just maybe, help her out financially or let her stay with us while she got back on her feet. I stared at her, completely flabbergasted. I couldn't even form words. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of this woman blew my mind into a million pieces. She abandoned two traumatized kids with $20 on a kitchen counter, vanished for nearly 2 decades, built a whole new life, and now that her second life was crashing down around her, she expected her abandoned children to be her retirement plan and her rescue squad? Before I could even open my mouth to unleash every single curse word I knew, the front door unlocked and swung open. Leo walked in, holding a bag of groceries he had picked up for me. He stopped dead in his tracks right inside the entryway. He dropped the grocery bag on the floor, the sound of a box of pasta hitting the linoleum echoing loudly in the quiet apartment. Leo's eyes locked onto Brenda, sitting at my kitchen island. I watched the color completely drain from my brother's face, followed instantly by a dark, terrifying flush of pure rage. Leo didn't yell, he didn't scream or throw a punch. He walked slowly into the kitchen, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter, and stood right next to me. He looked Brenda up and down as if she were a piece of garbage stuck to the bottom of his shoe. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here," Leo said, his voice terrifyingly calm and low. Brenda stammered, looking between the two of us, trying to put on her pathetic act again, saying she was so sorry, that she was desperate, that we were her flesh and blood and family is supposed to stick together. Family? Leo let out a harsh, bitter laugh that had zero humor in it. "You lost the right to use that word 16 years ago when you left us with a $20 bill and a note. Where was our family when we were growing up? Where was our family when Chloe cried herself to sleep every night asking why her mom didn't love her? Where was our family at our graduations, our birthdays, our hard times? You weren't there. You chose to walk away. You made your bed, now lie in it." Brenda started crying harder, playing the victim, saying she was a sick woman, that life was hard, and that we were being cold-hearted monsters. She looked right at me, begging me to intervene, saying, "Surely your sister remembers how much I loved you before things got hard." That was my breaking point. I looked at her, and all the residual trauma, all the years of feeling unloved, just dissolved into absolute power and clarity. I leaned forward across the counter, right into her face, and told her something she never expected to hear. I said, "Listen to me very carefully. You left a 6-year-old child and a 9-year-old child to fend for themselves. You didn't care about us then. You only care about us now because you need something from us. Well, you're looking at two people who owe you nothing. Not a single dime, not a single minute of our time, and certainly not a place to stay. You are a complete stranger to us. Get out of my apartment before I call the cops and have you physically dragged out of here." She realized right then and there that her manipulation tactics weren't going to work. The mask slipped for a second, and I saw a flash of pure, cold anger in her eyes. The exact same look she had given us right before she walked out all those years ago. She stood up, grabbed her heavy trench coat, and snatched her leather suitcase off the floor. She muttered something under her breath about how ungrateful and cruel we were, how we turned out just like our stubborn father's side of the family, and marched out the front door, slamming it behind her with a force that shook the walls. Leo and I just stood there in the silence of the kitchen for a long time. Neither of us said anything. Then Leo bent down, picked up the groceries, and looked at me with a small, exhausted smile. He asked if I wanted to order some takeout and watch a movie to decompress. I nodded, feeling lighter than I had ever felt in my entire life. That night, sitting on the couch with my brother, eating pizza and laughing at a stupid comedy, I realized something profound. Brenda didn't just abandon us 16 years ago. She gave us the chance to build a bond between Leo and me that is unbreakable. We didn't need her then, and we sure as hell don't need her now. But looking back on how she waltzed back into our lives expecting a bailout still blows my mind to this day. What would you guys do in my situation? Would you have done the exact same thing, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments.